Good morning, Belfry Bunch. Good morning to our young people. Good morning to everyone who is young in heart. This Sunday is Holy Trinity Sunday, and our first reading is from Genesis chapter 1, one of two stories of how God created the world that we find in the book of Genesis. The first story is Genesis 1:1 through chapter 2, the middle of verse 4. And lately, our church publisher is just making more and more good books for children and young people. And I want to share with you another one. This is just came out a few months ago. It's called The Fabulous World That God Made by Joyce Ellis. It's in the style of that old poem, This is the House That Jack Built. But instead, it's the fabulous world that God made. And like the book of Genesis, it starts off with just darkness. This is the darkness that filled all of space before the fabulous world that God made. Isn't that pretty? This is the voice that spoke God's mighty word to bring forth the light in the darkness that ruled and filled all space in the fabulous world that God made. This is the sun that God hung way up high to light up the day. Then he welcomed the moon to light up the night and shatter the darkness that filled all of space in the fabulous world that God made. These are the hands that reached out in great love and divided the heavens from earth down below in the bright shimmering light that shattered the darkness that filled all of space in the fabulous world that God had made. These are the lands and the oceans God shaped and put under the heavens in the bright shimmering light that shattered the darkness that filled all of space in the fabulous world that God made. These are the grasses, the tulips, and oaks God planted on earth and put under the heavens in the bright shimmering light that shattered the darkness that filled all of space in the fabulous world that God made. And then this is my favorite page. We got penguins. These are the dolphins, the penguins and whales, the great sharks and otters, the clownfish and seals that swam free in the seas that God parted from land in the fabulous world that God made. I also really like the otters. And now look at all these birds. These are the parrots, the cardinals and geese, the herons and toucans, the bats and the bees that flew high in the skies up above land and seas in the fabulous world that God made. These are the horses, the cheetahs and frogs, the snakes and giraffes, and the monkeys and dogs that trotted and swung, hopped and slithered and ran, and ate from the grasses and the flowers and trees that covered the land in the bright shimmering light that shattered the darkness that filled all of space in the fabulous world that God made. These are the humans that God set apart like no other creatures He made until then, two people created in God's special plan to be like Him and love Him and serve Him each day. God shaped the first man from the dust of the ground, and He breathed out His breath to bring Adam to life. Then God made a woman for Adam named Eve, a side-by-side partner to love and be loved. This woman and man, in their own special ways, looked after the Hebrews, the zebras and bears, the lilies and violets, the palm trees and pines that grew strong on the land in the bright shimmering light that shattered the darkness that filled all of space and the fabulous world that God made. So look all around at the land and the seas, the animals, stars, and the plants, and the trees. And look at the people, like you and like me, that God has some plans for, like Adam and Eve. God calls us together to care for these gifts, to be like Him and love Him and serve Him each day in the fantabulous world that God made. I think that's a wonderful way to tell the story of how God created the world. Just remember, God out of love created this world, and God created you out of love. God, through Jesus, loves you very much. Goodbye, Belfry Bunch. See you soon.